Yes, yes, we were there 3 times, and with June and Angela and Bill, and Dr. Smith, Jonathan. Quite something. It was fun. I had June. June was wonderful. You know, she was so strong and very, very, very clever and very informed about everything, it seemed. She knew science, she knew space, she knew, in fact, when, for my husband's 50th birthday, I wanted to surprise him and go to, he always had wanted to go on the Goodyear blimp. And I said, oh, how can I make this happen? How can I make this happen? And so I called June. And she said, oh, Marta, she said, that would just be wonderful. I will absolutely help you, but you have to promise me one thing. And I said, oh, sure, tell me, whatever it is. She said, that you take me along. And so we pick up June, and Kevin was part of the Big Brother program. We pick up his little brother, and we all drive down on 405. And Kevin said, and where are you taking me? What are you doing? What is this? And June is giggling, and I'm giggling, and Jason's giggling, and then all of a sudden he sees the blimp, and he said, "You're kidding." I said, "Thank June for it." And Kevin also knew June because she was part of a group called Legal Voices. She was my husband was an plaintiff's elder abuse attorney, and I said to her one time at a convention, I said, Kevin loves to sing. She goes, "You're kidding? Oh my gosh!" Oh, well, I'm the band chick. She called herself for Legal Voices, and so she immediately got him in, and so they would every Tuesday evening drive. He would pick June up, and they would drive to rehearsals, and they became very close. And it was always lovely to see them together because June loved men, and so she flirted with him, and he flirted with her, and it was really lovely. But so going to the conventions, we'd all be. We wouldn't see each other that often, except we would have lunch once in a while with Kevin Burns, who would bring us all together at 20th Century Fox, and so we would talk and laugh and tell stories about what we were all doing, and then also, of course, remembering our times at Lost in Space and the different conventions and the people we met there, and we always had a great time together. We would all giggle and laugh, and it was like we had been a family, which we had. I mean, we spent 3 years together, and unfortunately, we were supposed to go another year, but Irwin Allen had a battle with the head of CBS at the time. It was Perry Lafferty, and Perry Lafferty said, "Well, if you won't do what I'm asking you to do, then we'll just cancel you," and which was crazy because we had very, very good ratings throughout the whole time that we were on television. And nowadays, it would take a whole group of people in a room to make that decision, and they would never have done that because the revenue was very good from our show. And it was a personality clash, and Irwin just didn't want to be told what to do, and that was that. So I learned by a phone call that we had been canceled, and that was what? Oh, I wish I'd taken my costumes with me or something. But it ended up that Kevin Burns had my costumes, and they are now up for sale. in auction. And in fact, they've asked me to, I think ABC, the Good Morning Show, is going to be covering that, and they've asked me to be a part of that. But I'm going to say, well, only if I can have my costumes. No, I'll do it anyway. But I was surprised, I didn't know. Kevin never told me. And we would talk a couple of times a week. Kevin, you probably all know about him. He did Ancient Aliens, produced Ancient Aliens and Girls Next Door, and he was enamored with Lost in Space, that and the Munsters. And he was just, he was a delightful man. I miss him every day. He'd call me at like 10 o'clock at night and I'd say, I know who that is. And he'd say, Marta Kristen, and I'd say, Kevin Burns. And then we would talk for a couple of hours, and he would talk, and I would listen.
Yes, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Ron was a good friend of his. And but he had so many stories to tell. He was quite a raconteur. And he did Jonathan Harris really well. I never knew anyone.
That's what I would hear when I would answer the phone.
Yeah.
And he's the only one I let get away with saying, Ronnie.
Right. Exactly.
I was like, oh, hi, Kevin.
Yeah. You always knew who it was.
Oh, yeah. It freaked me out because it sounds so much like Jonathan.
Yeah. Kevin was a collector of items, and it's a world's a small place because my granddaughter, Lena, was asked by, she knew Kevin and had known him. I mean, she knew him, and I raised her, and so she was a baby when I'd be going out to dinner with Kevin and Kevin Burns, and so he saw her grow up, and his partner, business partner, John Dashney, when after Kevin died, asked Lena, who was she was an assistant for 8 producers on Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, and she was amazing. She was working 24/7 for them, and after a while she asked for a raise, and they wanted to give her a 50-cent raise. And well, here I understand. I mean, the minimum wage here is crazy in this country, and she was getting $12.50 an hour or something like that, and working days, as I said, 24/7. Anyway, so John called her and said, we would like you to, at Prometheus, go through and catalog Kevin's collections. And there were storage areas that were 3 times the size of this room, and 3 of them. And Lena, for a year, cataloged everything. And now they're, of course, up for auction, his memorabilia, because he left it to his family, his niece. So people always ask me, can you believe that Lost in Space is still, vital at this point, and after 50-some years? And I always say yes, because it really touches something that never has changed, and throughout all the years, and civilization, is that we care about our families. That's our connection to our families are the most important, and that's essentially what Swiss Family Robinson was about. How do you survive, and how do you hold each other up during those times? I mean, I think we all sort of felt. We got a feeling of that during this pandemic, where we're just completely isolated, and so Lost in Space had that, I mean, it was a family adventure series, so it's not exactly, how we are when having to be alone in our homes, but it really was about the support that we need from people, from the human connection, and of course mainly our families, and then then our friends and that circle that we have about each other and that we need from each other, that connection. That's really what the show was about. And ultimately, I mean, that was all underneath everything. It wasn't, it wasn't overt, but it was, it certainly had the importance of family and how do you get through crises, even though they're different than what we have with monsters and cyclops and all that and raging seas but how do you get through that? And Dr. Smith, of course, because there's always somebody. But that, I think, was ultimately what the show was about. I was telling a story yesterday about a journalist, a well-known TV journalist and critic, who was asked, which do you prefer, Star Trek or Lost in Space? And this was, of course, in the 60s, late 60s. And he said, well, I prefer, and I'm going to surprise you, because, he was a sophisticated man. He said, but I prefer Lost in Space. And the man was really surprised. And he said, why? He said, because there's there's one segment where Bill asks his father. Well, his father has been, John Robinson has a helmet has been put on his head by aliens, and it makes him a completely different person, angry and mean and violent. And Bill and he's been told to throw Bill off the cliff. And Bill, in his inimitable style, his nose goes a tear. He says, "Can I just tell you one thing before you do that?" And John, yeah, and says, "I just want to say I love you." And the helmet's taken off. I just want to cry about it because the helmet's taken off and they hug each other, and the journalist said, "That's why." The TV reviewer said, "That's why I like Lost in Space, because it's what we're all about." And it sounds cheesy, but it's the ultimate and absolute necessity in our world and towards each other and in our hearts, that we need to have that understanding and feeling. At least for me, I'm an orphan. I was adopted when I was 5. And so family, when I was adopted, family means everything to me. And my parents, thank God, they saved my life. They made me confident about myself. No matter how many times I threw temper tantrums and rolled on the ground and cried, and because of my frustrations and my history, they were so loving and kind and understanding. And I know I'll meet them again someday, and I will thank them for it. I'm rambling, but I just, one of my aims in this world is to try and spread that message. And I can't do it in a big venue or a big forum, but I can do it individually, and I'm hoping that I can, do that here, and that's why I love conventions, because I love meeting people, and I love, finding out who you are, and telling people how much I care about it. So, do you have any questions? I haven't answered really much about Lost in Space, but does anyone have any questions? Yes.
First of all, my husband Brian has a crush on you.
I have a crush My first 5 years was in an orphanage in Norway, and I was the only half German child there, and the Germans were just hideous in that country, and at one point they wanted to. I was in an underground orphanage because they were taking children and sending them to Germany to families that wanted adorable, blue-eyed, blonde-haired children. And, but the word got out that I was half German. And then, so I was called the Nazi child by the children. And if I ever wrote a book, I would say the father's sons are visited on their children. And I think that's why I started entertaining. I started dancing and singing because it was my way of surviving. And of course I wasn't a Nazi by any means, and it's interesting because I feel there was a great guilt I felt as a child about it. And the more I read about the Nazis, the more horrified I became. And when I was pregnant, I traveled by myself throughout Europe for 2 months on a train. And part of my trip was in Germany. And I kept meeting young people who said, it wasn't us, we didn't do it. And so that helped me, it sort of cleansed me. My guilt, my feeling, the guilt you inherit. And then I was, when I was 5, I came to America, arrived in New York City, and to my parents. I flew from SAS. I have a picture of myself being held by the flight attendant, stewardess at the time, and I thought she was going to be my mother. I didn't, I was so confused. But my parents said, as I walked toward them, my adopted parents, my only parents, I walked like Charlie Chaplin with my feet out, pointed out like this, and they were both educators, and so they said, aha, the light went on. They said, that's what we can nurture. We see something in her, and it was absolutely true. I learned English, and I changed my name from Birgit to Marta, or Martha really, but pronounced Marta in Norwegian, because the woman who helped me get to America, her name was Marta Benson, and she was just the most wonderful, kind human being. She worked. She was a social worker, and helped place children in orphanages. And my mother said, my adopted mother said, she got my first picture when I was 3 years old, and she said she worked every day for 2 years, did something to get me here, because they didn't want to release me. There was another family in South Africa that wanted to adopt me. They gave me tests, and they were, they came out very well, and so all of a sudden people from different countries wanted to adopt me. Then my birth mother had to be contacted because my papers ended up being missed for the papers she had signed. So they had to find her so that I could be released. And she said, well, maybe I should keep her. Everybody wants her, maybe I should keep her. And Marta Benson said, absolutely not. I'm sending her as far away as I can to America, and give her a chance, and give Birgit a chance. And so that's how I ended up here. And I was raised in Michigan. I'm so happy that I was. It was a great, we lived on 5 acres. I was surrounded by everything I loved, and climb the trees, and my father built a huge slide. He had been a farmer in Minnesota and ended up being a professor of philosophy at Wayne State University in Detroit. And my mother had been a businesswoman but became a school teacher, 4th grade. And it was in many ways an idyllic upbringing. My brother and I always fought, but they had adopted a boy before I came, who was 8 years old and had a very, very, very tough background, difficult background. And they were fostering him, but then ended up adopting him. And that's why they wanted to adopt a sibling for him. And they, so Michigan was quite I was around horses, and I was a tomboy, and I was playing baseball all summer, and running in the grass, and climbing the trees, and playing hide and seek in the corn. My father, as I said, had been raised on a farm in Minnesota, so we always had these most wonderful vegetables, and all these great raspberry. But I had to pick everything, but you could just take that tomato and just take it right off the vine, and it was really good. You can't find that anymore, no, unless you grow them yourself. Then in 1960, my parents decided that they would take a sabbatical from teaching and go and visit my mother's sister in California, in Pacific Palisades. And so we packed up our car, and they both, took their break from teaching, and we packed up our car. What was it, a 1955 Ford station wagon, black and white with red and white interior. I loved that car. I remember it so well. And we just drove out to California. And after a while of being there, a couple of months, I was sitting in a restaurant called Zuki's. It was a deli, and a man came up to me. I was talking with my girlfriend, and he said, he said, my name is James Harris. I'm producing a movie called Lolita, and are you interested in acting? And I looked at him and I said, I've never been interested in anything else, and which was the truth. And so he said, well, Lolita is a very special story, and perhaps your family would like to, your parents would like to read the book as well as you. And my parents said absolutely not. And but I don't know what it was, but he, no strings attached. He got an agent for me, and the agent was Lillian Small, and she was quite well known, and she started getting me work right away in film. And then I also joined a theater company, which is still going today. And we didn't even have a theater, we were just meeting in homes. And then we would put on a production at a local school called the Morgan Wixon Theater. But and that was me. I said I'm continuing to do theater. I even asked to sing with the school band at Santa Monica High School. I had never done that before in my life. And I didn't get any rehearsals because the band leader said, well, I have a singer. But the school said, you have to let this girl. And so it was a disastrous evening. I sang Blue Moon. And the band, I didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, it was exciting to be in California. It was, the weather, of course, was very different from Michigan, and California was a completely different lifestyle than what I had been used to. But when I started working, I then went to Hollywood Professional School. And Hollywood Professional School had all the Mouseketeers, and it was an exciting time. I had to take a bus almost 2 hours to school, because it was way in Hollywood, and I'd have to wait for an hour or half an hour in Beverly Hills for a transfer, and but then a man came on the bus one day and exposed himself to me, and so I went gulp, and I went home and told my parents, and they immediately said, well, maybe you should have a car. And so we bought a 1957 Ford convertible. Oh, that was dangerous, dangerous, but I loved it, and all my friends loved it, and I'd pick them up, and we'd all, get in the car. But Hollywood Professional School, it was really one of a kind, and there was a woman named Mrs. Mann who ran it, and she had black hair that she cut, and just she was very stern, but the one thing I found, they had a weakness, and that was that if you wrote a letter saying, or had your parents write a letter saying that you had a doctor's appointment or a therapy appointment, or saying, oh yes, you go right ahead. So, once a week I'd say, Marta has her therapy. I'd write it myself. And I would go to, with my few of my friends, we'd all go, and we'd go to the old, wonderful apartment buildings in Hollywood. And in the old district, Wilshire district. And they were spectacular buildings. I've always loved architecture. And we'd take the elevator and go to the top, and then there would be ladders that would go to the roof, and we'd climb those ladders, and we'd be looking out at all these wonderful buildings. And then we'd also go to Griffith Park, and we'd take our bread and milk and pretend like we were drinking wine and cheese, and read poetry, and it was quite a special time. And then I was working. I did Savage Sam. I did a variety of television shows, almost all the television shows on network, and then some of you are sleeping. I'm sorry. Just ask questions. I'm just rattling on, trying to fill the time.
No, go on. So then.
Okay. Well, thank you. So then I started working and doing the Alfred Hitchcock Show and My Three Sons and the Reddy Young Show and the Shirley Temple Storybook Hour and just lots and lots of shows, and at the same time I worked in a dress shop to earn extra money. I ushered at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, which was amazing because I was able to see people like Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, all the amazing singers that I found out about while I was there, and so I followed them after, and people would give me tips. Oh, thank you, and but my parents always instilled in me the idea that you have to work, you have to earn your own money, and I don't know about now, but that was a good work ethic for me because I've always done that, and also it's, as an actor, you have to encounter as many people as you can, because acting is really about studying people and connecting with people and finding out about the human condition through the people you meet and your observations, and without that you don't have anything to work with except your own emotions, which is as important but equal to what you've observed. And so after graduating from there, I started UCLA in the drama department there, but then I started working a lot, and I started Lost in Space, and that was, I didn't want to do Lost in Space at first. Even though I was a huge admirer of sci-fi, I read Isaac Asimov and Martian Chronicles,
Ray
Ray Bradbury, of course, Ray Bradbury, and all the other, stories written by amazing sci-fi authors. And so I thought, well, Lost in Space, well, I don't know. And I found out how many people were in the cast, and I said, oh no, I'll just get, I'll get lost. And Irwin called me every day for 2 weeks. And by that time I had married very young. I think part of it was because my parents had both gone back. I had lived with my friends' parents, and I think the man I married was a psychologist and was very fatherly and in some ways, and but he wouldn't talk to me for when I said no, I don't want to do it. I want to do theater. There are other things that I really want to do, but Irwin said, Marta, he said, I have storylines. I have great stories for you, that are great scripts that I know, you'll be the center of, and he had seen a good part of my work, and in fact, a couple of programs, one mainly called 4 Feet in the Morning, I had done the show was up for Emmys, and so I finally said yes, and Irwin was very happy about that. And then the day of, the first day, I'm driving my little Volkswagen Squareback and into the studio, and I'm thinking to myself, at 6 a.m. in the morning, Marta Kristen, Birgit Rusanen, Martha Soderquist, you're driving to a certain destiny, and you're doing something that almost every actor dreams of doing, and how far you've come, and it's a miracle, God-given miracle. And I arrive there, I get on the set, and there it's buzzing with people, and there's panels and people who are extras that are getting ready for being part of the press corps, and I got so excited and so happy. I go to makeup, and there's June and Guy and Billy and Angela hadn't arrived yet, and there's Jonathan and we're all no, Jonathan wasn't there yet, and we're all there. And I meet my makeup person, and they say, what would you like for breakfast? And they bring me breakfast. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. And that began the saga of Lost in Space and myself. It really was a stunning, stunning show. Irwin Allen was a taskmaster. He would come down and he'd bang take a hammer and a wastebasket. Time is money, listen everybody, when we would be running late, and it was the most expensive pilot ever done, television pilot ever done. And one of the great thrills of doing Lost in Space was working with every fantastic character actor in Hollywood. I mean, we had, Ron Help, Fritz Feld, and
Wally Cox.
Yes.
Michael Rennie.
Michael Rennie. I had a mad crush on him.
No, I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, Albert
Like
Salmi.
Strother Martin.
Strother Martin, thank you. He's my brain. He has a great memory. Anyway. It was, and Mercedes McCambridge.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, they were wonderful to watch. because well, Jonathan, of course, Jonathan was, when Jonathan joined and you know, when they brought him in as the bad guy.
Wait, John
oh.
Carradine.
Oh, John Carradine, oh yes, I have a
Yeah,
great photo
yeah,
with John
yeah.
Carradine.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Al Lewis.
Al Lewis, yes. Oh, that's right. Who?
Great. I'm talking to myself.
Oh.
He was Grandpa on the Munsters.
Grandpa and the Munsters, yes. Kevin Burns, one of his favorite shows. So, you know, working with these character actors you watch, I always tell young actors, do not, if you're, whether you're doing a theater piece, whether you're doing a television program, movie, you stay on this set. You learn from watching, because you learn as much from watching as you do from doing, and learn mistakes as well as you know, good things. And so so that's what I did, and I loved watching the people, how they created their characters, how they you know, and how prepared they were, and they all were. And also you learn that character acting is the lifeblood of the industry. It's not necessarily the leads, it's the character actors, that their careers stay. And this is what I tell my granddaughter, who wants to be in the business, that and she's been to New York Film Academy and on scholarship actually, and she wants to be the leading lady because she's very pretty, but she's funny. And I said, Lena, that's where you go. That's where you go to, you know, go with your humor, go with your comedy skills. She's been in 15 musicals as the lead, and she's really extraordinary. But that's an aside. I digress. So in a way, we were a family. June and Guy were, they taught me Scrabble, killer Scrabble. And we'd sit, and you know, we had so much time in between scenes. And, you know, like Q words without a U, you know, 7-letter words, or, you know, over and over and over again. And Guy was a great lover of classical music. So classical music was always coming out of his dressing room. And all and Billy, I tried to give Billy as much information about music because he loved music and started playing guitar. And so he'd pick on the guitar and we'd sing together. And Angela was so cute. We'd have lunch together, and she'd always have an ice cream sundae, and once in a while I had one. And my marriage was falling apart during that time, though, and that was hard. But my escape was, I spent most of my time on the set anyway. So my escape was going to the set, and it ended up being just this extraordinary experience, and that it still has a following, and that you look at it and you see it and you say, that is so much fun. You know, it's just, it has a nostalgia and a tenderness and an innocence to it. Even though it's, you know, got the monsters and the, you know, like there was one monster that he didn't have his fly up, you know, I mean, the zipper was down, you know, and June has a picture of it with him behind her like this, and she's going like this, but his zipper's down. He has a big furry monster. And then of course, you know, our lasting friendship. June and we get along, and we still see each other, and I've written a children's story and shared that with Angela and Bill and Kevin Burns. Then of course there's the new Netflix show, and Kevin Burns, for my birthday, just before COVID started, gave me a big birthday party at a restaurant that he frequented in Beverly Hills, and he, at the end, he knocks on all the, his glass and says, "I want to make an announcement." And then he hands me an envelope and a book, actually the book, the Lost in Space book. And he hands it to me and says, "Marta, this is for you. Open up the envelope." I opened it up and it said, "We want you to be in the 3rd season of Netflix, Lost in Space, as Polly Parker's mother. And your name is going to be Joanne Williams." Joanne was his sister's name, and she had passed the year before. And, I'm trying to remember whether she had passed that,
Yeah.
just before that. And
Maybe a little bit more than a year.
no, I think it was a little bit.
Was it less?
Yeah, but his sister name was Jo, J-O-A-N, and that was for his father and his mother. And that's how his sister had been named that. And Williams, of course, after Guy Williams. And he was so delighted, and then COVID hit, and the pandemic hit, and I was supposed to go in June, and to Canada, because they film up in
Vancouver.
Vancouver, thank you. And the week before I was to go, they closed the doors. Canada closed the doors, and to anyone who wasn't, a series regular. And Kevin died.
Well, they delayed production. They didn't even start. They weren't even filming in June.
Oh, they weren't.
No, they didn't start filming. They got pushed back till October of last year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because Kevin died in September.
Yeah.
And September 27th.
But then they had all those restrictions on who could and
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
be in the cast
Yeah.
at that point.
But my husband had died in 2016, and Kevin was so wonderful. He knew how deep, we were together 43 years, so it was a long, wonderful marriage, and how much I missed him. So that's why he was calling every night, or twice, a couple of times a week, and he knew that this would lift my spirits, and it certainly did. I was so happy to think that I was going to be on set in Vancouver and with all the new wonderful people. I had met all of them at the premiere that they showed in Hollywood, and Polly Parker especially. She was so kind. She came up to me and says, "I'm so glad to meet you," and it was a good match. It would have been a good match, but so I was very, very, very sad that, first of all, that Kevin died, and then because I so much wanted to do the show for him, because he was thrilled. Yeah, I can't tell you, he was like a little boy. He was so thrilled that I was going to be doing this show, and I have a feeling that if he had been alive, he would have gotten me. He would have driven me across the border, found some way to get me there. But yeah, I mean, he really.
And I know how excited he was. I told you the other day, I knew you were going to be in it before you did.
Yes.
He had told me that a long time before
Yeah.
that. He was just so excited about that.
Yeah.
So
Well, he had been telling me, he had told me that he was trying to
was
find a
working
way
on it, yeah.
to get Mark and myself in the 3rd season. And because Angela was in the 2nd and Billy was in the 1st. So anyway, so Lost in Space has been a huge part of my life, and the best thing about it is that it's brought me people like Kevin Burns and people like Ron and people like you. It's been a remarkable time in my life, and a connection in my life, and a great history. So
I think that one of the things I hear most, on the Facebook page that I do, is, oh, I wish Lost in Space hadn't ended.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, like you're saying, it didn't really end. You may not be making new episodes, but you guys are always out there, and it never went away.
No.
Like a lot of shows.
Yeah.
I said, pick a show from the 60s and how many people go to conventions for them,
That's right.
or the 70s or the 80s,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very rare that something connects with people that they want to keep reliving it and experiencing it for 50 years.
And I think it's because I love you, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, yeah, it's true. And Kevin Burns was a shaker and mover also in keeping it going, and he really did promote it and because he loved it so much.
Yeah, because when they did the 1998 movie, he made sure that any licensing agreements for toys or whatever for the new movie, for every item they did, they had to do something with the original series.
Oh, yes.
So that's why they put out a new line of toys
Yeah.
for the original series
Yeah.
back then. So he didn't want that to ever
Well,
go away.
I do have to say merchandising has not been anything that
No.
I've gotten anything, gotten anything from, and certainly nothing from the show. Nowadays, it wasn't until after Lost in Space ended that Screen Actors Guild got actors a certain, what do you call it, money that
Royalty?
well, royalties,
Residuals?
residuals, yeah, but there's a certain term for it where they never end.
Yeah.
You just continue to get them for the rest of your
Is it
life.
in perpetuity?
In perpetuity, yeah. And thank you. We only received residuals up to a certain amount, and then nothing.
It was like 2 showings or something after the original.
Yeah,
aired.
well, it was a little more than that, but it was limited. And it's really not fair because it's on all around the world. It's somewhere in the world it's playing. And I mean, I've met people from Russia and we know, in South America, and I mean, it's there. In the Middle East, it's always running. And here's on the Me, I want to say Me Too. Here's on the Me channel, and and we should be receiving. The actors are always sort of the low man on the totem pole when it comes to getting money, and it used to be that people like Alfred Hitchcock would say, call in the sheep, meaning the actors. It's changed somewhat, but Screen Actors Guild should be doing more for the senior the senior performers. They've even taken away our medical, which is, they said they blamed COVID, but it's just cheaper for them to, pawn us off to somebody else, and now we all have to pay higher premiums, and, it's not fair. Not fair, damn it. But, because I never needed it until now, and, I mean, I don't have health issues except some arthritis, but God knows if I do, I will, but I'm not even going there. It's, again, Lost in Space has been an amazing journey, and I'm so glad to be a part of it, and what an amazing life I feel I've had, and coming from an orphanage to here and being here, it's really quite something, and I thank you for being here.
Anybody else?
Any other? Your question really started something.
You still have some time?
Yes.
Were you happy with the storylines that Judy got, or how did that work out?
Well, they were Yes, well, of course I love playing bad Judy. Yeah, in fact, my husband's mother was very religious, and one time we went back to visit in Long Island, and a priest came over for dinner, and he was very funny. He was from South America, and he said, Martha, he says, do you like being good or bad characters? I said, oh, bad, Father. And he laughed. I said, it's much more interesting. And the show where I go to the plant and become a duplicate, but a bad duplicate. I loved it and I'm a plant apparently, and because when I go to have dinner with with the family, they say, don't you want some salad? And I say, I don't want any salad. I actually loved doing the Great Vegetable Rebellion. I know it was. I thought, I cannot believe I'm talking to a carrot. A big carrot.
Stanley Adams was probably thinking, I can't believe I'm wearing a big
I'm
carrot.
wearing a carrot. I am a carrot. Oh my God, what has my career come to? Mark Goddard says, 7 years of Stanislavski, and I'm talking to a carrot. But I was so amused throughout it. If you watch it, I'm just smiling the whole time. Just smiling.
Didn't you, I think I remember you saying one time that there were like people off camera making the sounds when you were hacking at the plants?
Oh, yes, yes.
That they dubbed in later, but they were
Right.
actually
Right.
like people making
Yes.
the, ooh, oh.
Right. There were some memorable events that happened there. Yeah, and I remember one time, June and Guy refused to do some shots because they thought that the camera angle wasn't attractive, and so they said, no, we're not doing it. And actually, the director was one of my favorite directors, Don Richardson. He took chances, but they were suspended for 2 shows. They were not, because you pretty much do what a director says. If you have problems, then you call the higher ups, but you don't just take the law into your own hands and go sit in your dressing room and refuse to go on the set. And I understand June and Guy. They were supposed to be the stars of the show, and I think I started talking about that earlier. And Jonathan was smart. Jonathan knew that his character wouldn't last if he continued to be, as deceptive as he was, and so he began to make him the villain you love to hate, and the cowardly villain you love to hate. So and he rewrote everything. Jonathan did, and I learned a lot from Jonathan. Not that I've had that opportunity, or that I would, but Jonathan was very smart. He would go as soon as we would get our scripts for the week on Friday, he would spend all weekend writing his own those wonderful alliterations he did, Bubble-Headed Booby and all that. And he would write that all in, and he would take it to Irwin, and on Monday morning he'd say, here, this is, these are the changes I've made, and Irwin would look at it and say, oh, those are wonderful, okay. And I learned from Jonathan, always be the last person in the scene, be the person in the scene to say the last words, because then they end up on you. The camera ends up on you. And I learned a lot from as I said earlier, you watch how how people interact. You watch how the crew will give up everything for you if you're good to them. And of course you should be, number one. Number two, you're all working together, it's an ensemble, and you want it to be the best that it can be. And so June and Guy leaving the set just didn't follow that law, the unspoken, unwritten law that you follow when you go on set. And but again, I could understand their frustrations, and they no longer were the stars. And Jonathan just was glowing that it became about him, and he had been working hard all of his life. He had been born very, very poor during the Depression. His family was so poor that he always, this is what he said anyway, that he slept on the dining room table because his room was rented out. And it was a difficult time, and his father was a pharmacist.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went into pharmacy himself, and I don't know whether his father was a pharmacist, but I know that Jonathan went to school and became a pharmacist. And one day he came home, he said, "Dad, I was not made for this job. I'm going to go into theater, Mom and Dad." And they were horrified. They said, "Oh, my son, how are you going to take care of yourself?" And he said, "I already have a theater piece." And it was The Woman of Chaillot, and The Lady of Chaillot. And that ran for like 3 or 4 years. I mean, it was, and he became a wonderful working actor, a character actor. And you often see him on the old television shows.
He was on Twilight Zone.
Pardon?
Oh, I just remember him from the Twilight Zone.
Yes, Twilight Zone, right. And just a whole bunch of them.
The Bill Dana show.
The Bill Dana show, yeah, he was on the Bill Dana show for a long time. And he had a wonderful wife who talked like this. And so I think Jonathan took a lot from her. However, both of them were from, what was it, the Bronx?
Mm-hmm.
And both of them, they met in high school, and they ended up marrying when they got out of school, and they both remade themselves and taught themselves, to speak properly. And Gertrude was her name. She reminded me so much of my mother. And I became friends with Gertrude after Jonathan died, and I would pick her up and take her places, and we'd go out to dinner. And she worked her way up from nothing and became a female executive at Max Factor. Now, that was very unusual in the 50s and 60s for a woman to be an executive. And she developed DEP, I don't know if you remember DEP, I do, but it was a gel that you put on your hair, and it came in different colors, the yellow for the blonde, the blue for the gray, the red for the brunettes, and she developed them, and with of course the scientists, and she expected a raise, and she wasn't given a raise, and she went to the front, the head guy, and said, "I'm leaving." I said, "You can't leave." She said, "I'm leaving unless you give me a raise." They said, "Well, we can't do that." Well, she left, and a couple of days later, they get this frantic call saying, "Gertrude, whatever you want, we're going to give you," because they found that they couldn't do it. She was so brilliant, and people loved her so much because she had this great warmth and elegance, and and it's interesting that Jonathan has kept his family life very separate from work. And so I didn't get to meet Gertrude until after the show and when we would get together for dinners and Gertrude would be there. And as I said, after my mother passed in 1998, Gertrude, it was after Jonathan died in 2003 that I became friends with Gertrude. And I was really looking for, I mean, it was so wonderful to meet her because she was clever like my mother and funny, dry sense of humor, and bright red hair. But then she broke her hip. And shortly after that, about a year later, she died. And she had a dog named Zachary. And I found out that the dog had been put in a kennel, the local animal shelter, and I immediately went and picked it up. Well, Zachary was a dog from hell. He peed on everything, and I don't think he had ever been walked, because the first time I walked him, I took him with my other dogs. And he came home the next morning. He was a part Jack Russell, Chihuahua. I think it was like a Chihuahua Jack Russell mix. He was fat and little tiny legs, beady little eyes, black. And terrified of everything. And my one dog, female dog, good name. She went right after him. I said, no, don't do that. But he became part of the family. But I had, fortunately, slip covers on all my furniture. And so I was able to wash every corner that he peed on. And I never could break him of that except to put aluminum foil everywhere so that if he got near it, it would make noise and he would run. But But Zachary died of an enlarged heart. Oh, what is this?
They're probably getting set up.
Yeah.
This is my electric of my face.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
But
right
anyway,
at 12:30.
so we had every birthday we would get together at a restaurant with Kevin Burns and the whole cast, and then the people who knew Jonathan, and somebody who bought Jonathan's house was Kevin Burns' assistant, and so we all got up to talk, and I got up and I said, well, Robert got the house, well, I got the dog. But Zachary, he was quite something. He was quite something, and he lived up to his name. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.